Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by once again. You probably thought I had died of the coronavirus or whatever, that I just simply disappeared. You know, this is one of the reasons why I don't charge anybody anything, and I don't ask for money or donations or run advertisements or what have you. When I get busy in a number of things, I do them, and what suffers is this, more often than not. Right at the moment, it's not such a great suffering for you because there's no way you're getting down here anytime soon, and I know that. So we have some time to work with. But I've been wrapped up here in the whole business of watching things unfold. And taking part in the unfolding as a result. I wanted to really get a grip on how things were going here, what the direction was, where it appeared to be taking us, and so forth before I spoke to you. There is so much misinformation that goes out, and I'm not at all interested in adding to that. But maybe not so much in terms of Panama, but I'm sure there's some. You know, I see a little bit here and there scattered around here in social media, and just want to roll your eyes and think, where do these people come up with this stuff? But no, it's a very human situation. We're really dealing with it very directly. This is my third week, and basically, and being in the house or the apartment. Actually, at least 3 weeks. We had our first case here on the 9th of March. The virus didn't get here immediately. It took a little while to work its way around the world and get down here to Panama. I watched and I saw and heard the government as it talked about what it was doing to get prepared. Now, I've heard this sort of thing before, many different governments and many different matters of public health and others, viruses and what have you, in the past. And sometimes they really are planning, and other times they're really not sure yet what they're going to do, so forth. So I wanted to see, and I liked what I heard. And then I started to watch and see what actually occurred. I can't overstate the fact that a lot of us went into this somewhat concerned because the last administration had had its bad moments, had not been entirely transparent. And the survey of public opinion here in Panama was very negative toward government institutions. That was late last year when the new administration had only recently taken over and was beginning to make its reputation, but had a long ways to go. We did have another survey here, the same groups, and I'll follow up in a few minutes. I'll let you know how those came out. But at that stage of the game, people were not terribly happy, and I wasn't entirely sure. I had spoken with people in New York who were involved in the finance business and what have you, because they were concerned about all the financial situation here in Panama in terms of government expenses, and that had all come out. As I mentioned in my discussions back then, the government, the new administration, took the stance of, okay, we have a very serious problem here. They jumped on it. Whole pile of debts had not been paid, and there had been no indication they had not been paid. They were thought to have been paid. They weren't. And it really was ridiculous. And I stay totally out of Panamanian politics, but really, this really was disturbing. And people who oversee the whole banking and finance industry, what have you, and all over the world, Panama is just one nation, but it's been has a very good record. And this indication was, we got a problem here that we didn't think we had. And this administration jumped right on it. If you have been listening here for a while, that's one thing I like very much about them. They said, we owe this pile of money to different people, including many people here in Panama. Not our major debts to major banks and institutions for major projects. If you do that, everybody knows you got a problem. Here it's just a whole mass of different groups, private and public, that had not simply been paid. And we needed that to get that out of the way. And the government went out and they borrowed that money. They got a very good percentage rate on it because we are investment grade and because we have a very good record of paying off debt. I think at the time it was around 3 3/4%, which for a very small country like ours is very, very good at that point in time, particularly so. And we were pleased. So everybody was pleased. They had actually taken care of the problem instead of sitting there and spending, good Lord knows, 2, 3, 6, 12 months arguing and screaming and shouting at each other and playing politics. They just said, all right, we owe this money. That's clear. Let's pay it. We have to take on the debt to pay it off. Let's get it out of the way completely now and so we can get focused on building the economy. Well, that went fine. Now we were facing the potential for another type of disaster, one completely unexpected, and as you know, because you're going through it wherever you are too. This is a global situation. The government's explanation of how it was going about the planning process superficially looked excellent to me. They had gatherings and discussions in detail. We had everybody there, from people, the most militant labor unions across to the most conservative of business associations and all this sort of business. And we had people from the churches and people from a number of what they call here civil society organizations, which is any group of citizens, neighborhood groups or whatever, or special interest groups. Everybody got together. Everybody talked with the various government officials. There's a terrific amount of discussion and development of a plan, and everybody sort of signed on, including all the political parties. When they got the plan put together, the heads of all the parties here of any significance got into a conference. It was a virtual conference on the internet, and discussed it, and they all swore to support it, and everybody was solidly behind it. Very, very, very impressive how people really focused on this whole thing, and we had barely gotten any news of anything happening here. This was all actually started well before we had a single case of coronavirus here. And since then, the strategy of the government, which they have described in detail, I can show you now, this is a photograph of our President Laurentino Cortizo, Nito Cortizo. This is when he was describing the situation to the public, his first public address, as he described how we were going to proceed and deal with this coronavirus. And so it was. We moved on, and they really impressed me. Now they started to really impress me. One of the things they did was, I've also mentioned before, is they've set up teams that they send out every time they get notice of there being somebody who may have a coronavirus problem. They have a team that goes out to visit them, right directly to wherever they are, so they don't affect as few people as possible. When they can do that. Otherwise, if they show up at the hospital, they show up at the hospital. But the point was to get to them, find out who they had met, and really track it down. We had test kits from the very beginning. Before we had a single person in here, we had the testing kits, right? Everything they had thought about these things, the Ministry of Health here and the main Gorgas Hospital, which is like the ministry's headquarters and just a very well-known establishment for a very long time. They were very much on top of this, and they were following very carefully everything that was going on internationally and what the experience was of other people. So instead of waiting until the problem came, they started to move, assuming that it was going to come. And they were right, of course. But it was a total absence of politics. There was no silliness. There was no shouting and screaming. Everybody sat down, we listened to the medical authorities, we did what we needed to do, and we went to work. And I thought, all right, that's good, that's fine too. Then as a number of other things have happened, when it became clear that the medical system here was going to get overwhelmed at some point, which it has, but not overwhelmed to the point of non-functioning. It just has more than it can handle in hospitals. Then they started what I believe I mentioned in the last video, where they put out a 30-day contract for the creation of a modular hospital. They could be pulled apart and moved anywhere in the country, wherever the problem was needed, to have 100 rooms in it, 100 beds, and the necessary equipment and everything else. That should be done fairly soon. So it was over 70% completed, I think about a week ago, and it was moving along very well. The group doing it has a good history of this work. and everything seems to be in place. So here we had this going, which is not common. And as more and more information became available, it became very obvious that the plan was real and that it was detailed and that they simply moved forward on it. They're very firm. We had the quarantine, stay at home. We've had different systems tried to see which is the most workable for letting people leave the certain hours of the day, different age groups. It's amazing how detailed the whole program got and how much effort was made to try to communicate this to everybody so that they would understand it. And it was not just the president and the ministry people who were on television or radio, et cetera, and so forth, but when some news of some significance came, everybody's cell phone got a little message. And it said, such and such from the Ministry of Health. We don't need that as much now. We had that quite a bit in the beginning as people were getting used to things. We've tried different ways of dividing up the week and the hours and the days so that we don't overwhelm the supermarkets who have done noble duty here. I mean, just really, really super. My heart went out to these people. We, too, didn't have a lot of the stuff that we wanted to have, and masks and this sort of thing, because, quite frankly, it's very hard to get them anywhere, no matter who you are. But so a lot of these employees didn't have anything like that, neither did we who were shopping there. So even though they made a big deal about reducing the number of people in a supermarket at any specific period in time and of keeping us at a social distance and so forth, that was all fine and dandy. But it wasn't so much that I thought that the problem was the fact that we were too many of us or whatever. It was just the poor souls who had to work there, predominantly young adults, but also middle-aged and older people too, of course. And they had to spend the whole day there and go home and worry about whether they were carrying something, whether they'd pick something up from the rest of us or if they were going to share it with their family and so on. And they, very noble people. I was very impressed. Everybody from the get-go here, I've shopped at different supermarkets from working class shopping up to the most expensive, or the one that has the most variety of foods and from all over the world, blah, blah, blah. And everywhere I've gone, people have been polite. They have been orderly. They have not complained. There's no shoving. I mean, I was in line today. I had to get some shopping done because we're going to have some closures here for a while, and as I mentioned, for a couple of days, and I just needed to get something. So off I went to do that, and I saw the line of people snaking out from the supermarket down the sidewalk. I thought, oh, good, okay. That's how it is every time. And you get in line, and you try to keep your 6 feet from the person in front of you and so on. And now, this particular market, this is Reba, for people who live here. This is a high-end supermarket. They had closed down. That's not the virus. It's just from talking too much too quickly here. They had closed down for 2 days to completely clean and disinfect the store. It's just been going on like nonstop here. They were running, and it was a very useful thing to do. So as a result, more of this is going to be done. Everybody watches everybody else, and when they do something right, the word gets out. Other people adopt it as well. We only had one day that was Sunday, when nobody was allowed to be out in the street, unless they had specific responsibilities and they'd had written permission and everything else. Now we're going to have 2 this coming weekend, and that may become the norm. But it was an important thing to get everything set up, get it organized and running. Now we have to have face masks on. When we want to go to that particular supermarket line, they say we're going to have masks. And now we're getting more and more masks in and getting them out. I think we have a pretty good chance of being able to do this on a wider basis here fairly soon. It's been running to stay in place, but it has been really much more organized, focused, and logical than I have seen, to be quite frank, in most countries of the world. Excuse me for 1 second here. Now, I think another thing that's been very important here is that from the very first case on March 9th, we have tracked aggressively these people who are infected to find anyone they've touched. We've done such a good job of it that we have a very high rate of deaths and of confirmed cases per million people than pretty much anyone else in Latin America. And so people were thinking, my God, are we doing the wrong thing? Well, in fact, no, we're doing the right thing. Let's put it this way. The United States and most of Europe and what have you were roughly 3 weeks, 20 days or so, from the first case they got to a point where they were really had a plan underway, and they were starting to insist, at least in some areas, on people locking themselves in and staying out from and social distancing and everything else that was going on. That lag time allowed things to really, really, really spread. And they were not prepared. They didn't have the testing kits in many instances, and they weren't following it. Here, we did it right from day one, and the result was that we found people, and we tracked them down. It was amusing, not amusing really, but when I talked to somebody who thinks, gee, why our numbers are so high. Just a couple of days ago, I went in. I keep a track of how many cases are confirmed each day, which gives me a little chart to go by, and I will share that with you in a moment. But anyhow, I'm waiting to see whether we level off and start coming down and all this business. And since we've been pushing very hard, especially since we've had large orders of testing kits arrive in the last few weeks, we're now really, they really do use whatever. They have more than enough to take care of the situation. Actually, they have had for a while now. So our stats are different because these other nations, to be honest with you, in Latin America, weren't ready. And it wasn't just Latin America, but a lot of places. And they weren't keeping track of anything. And people died, of all likelihood, of a coronavirus without that being registered because it wasn't on anybody's list of things to do. Or, in a lot of, especially poorer countries, when somebody dies of pneumonia, they just die of pneumonia. That might not just be a question of pneumonia. It could be the coronavirus. And so it gives the fake or false impression that there are very few cases there, when in fact there are. And so many nations never got around to doing that. And we'll never know how many infections, how many people were even to the point of being a confirmed case. So 2 days ago, I went in to get my daily figure of the number of people who had been confirmed, and I was expecting it to be around 150, something of that sort, and it was 279. I thought, oh my God, it's going through the ceiling. What's happened? This is terrible. We've never had anything over 200. And then I read, oh, okay, it's actually 135. But there were an additional 144 cases. What they have done, and this is just a couple of days ago, is they've gone back through all the cases of people who died since we knew the coronavirus arrived, to determine anybody out there who actually died as a result of the coronavirus, or very likely could have. There was a strong probability of it. And they found 144 deaths that had been registered as other things, and they added it on to the total. So that makes things look even worse. But you see what's happening. What's really, really impressed everybody is honesty, transparency, and just getting it done and saying we're running to keep on top of this, but we're trying not to drop any of the balls. We're juggling balls. Let's put it that way. We're trying not to drop any, and being very open with people. As the president said just a couple of days ago, we're going to see a lot worse before we see better. And they've always been frank about this. This isn't going to just simply disappear overnight. I think they're being much more careful, a little more conservative in speaking about things getting better, in part because they don't want to get people's hopes up. They don't want people thinking, oh, after April, everything's going to be fine. Because that's been the general discussion here and globally, is that April is going to be the peak month. After that, things could improve. And as the president said, President Cortizo, maybe and maybe not. We can't afford to look at it that way. We have to assume that it's going to get worse. We already are in the middle of a severe recession here. Government income has fallen quite rapidly. Private income has fallen. One other thing that was done early on, and this, because they knew this was going to happen, was having already gone out to get $2 billion last year in order to pay off bills, they went right back into the international markets. And we were the first Latin American nation to actually go out and seek private sector loans for the money to sell bonds, specifically for the purpose of the coronavirus, dealing with the economic problems that were going to occur there. And we got $2.5 billion worth. And this sort of loans to countries and what have you, and whose economies are really being destroyed before their very eyes, let's just say that they have to pay a lot of money to get I'd say a lot of interest in order to get a bond sold. And Costa Rica was paying over 9%. And that was last year. I mean, that was before there was any coronavirus. I mean, Lord knows what they're going to have to pay now, because they're not investment grade, and they have not had much success in controlling their expenditures, and here they face this terrible disaster. They're wonderful people, and they have some great people in health, and they're going to get on top of this. We have great faith in our cousins next door, but the expense is just humongous, and I don't know what they're going to have to pay if they have to go out, and they will have to go out and borrow money. Everybody is. So, but being the first one out and having the record we've got, we paid 4.5% for $2.5 billion, and that's up, from the 3 3/4 we had last year. But believe me, it looks really good to a lot of our neighboring countries today. And it's done. The important thing is done. We also have our rainy day fund, our stabilization fund it's called, from profits made by the canal. And eventually we'll have contributions. Well, already, I guess, has had a few from the big copper mine and so on. It's about $1.3 billion in that. The special legislation had to be passed by the National Assembly to allow the government to make use of that if it were necessary as a result of this crisis. The general opinion everywhere is we don't want to touch a penny of that. It was, we just don't, because it's there for an emergency. We have an emergency. Can't we deal with this some other way first? But if we can't, we will use it, and it will happen. So that's been put in place. I've never seen so many politicians work together to get something done. But above all, it's because it's really not their business. I mean, the National Assembly has been sort of doing what it needs to do to support the government, and wisely so. Because the Panamanian people I know, and people can see it all around, they're really enthusiastic about, they're not happy, but they're impressed. They're impressed. That's the people who really need to get impressed here. And it's been pointed out that we've had something like 6,000 in the course of the entire period. People who've broken the curfew, or they've gone out when they're not supposed to be, and so on. They just have broken the rules. Well, we don't throw them into jail, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because then you have a lot of coronavirus cases in jail. But first offense, $50. Second one, $90. And I wouldn't suggest the third one because I don't think you're going to want to have to pay. But the point is they come down very hard. We've two groups put parties of sorts that never should have been held were, and I mentioned them the last time I talked to you. We had another one following that. These are rich people who think they can get away with anything, and they can't. And boy, did they come down hard on these folks, and they're not being put in jail, but shamed publicly. You can't even imagine. And in this society as small as this, that counts for a lot, and it's incredibly humiliating. And they'll be paying. They will be paying whatever money the courts judge that they need to pay. But really tough as nails on this whole business, all across the line. I don't know. I sort of going on and on. It is stream of consciousness to some extent, indeed, but it's also the reality that we're dealing with, and to watch it unfold. It's so much better than I expected. I never anticipated this. Never. In the 16 years since I first arrived here in Panama have I seen people go to work so quickly. Now, amongst the expatriate community, if you read in the social media from the expats' viewpoint, all sorts of people are going to be concerned, and they express all sorts of concerns. And some of them, I mean, a lot of them saying Three Cheers are doing great work, but there are those who just, they live on the surface, and they really don't know what's going on behind that surface or underneath it, and they don't see what's going on. And they have this vision of the terribly poor and struggling and starving Panamanians and so on. No. I mean, we've had a lot of programs. I keep talking about programs. One of the first, I have a photo here. I think I can show you now. Let's see, I'll stick it up. Okay. These are young adults who have been given jobs because they need something to keep going because they've lost their jobs. I mean, so many businesses have had to close down. Only essential businesses are allowed to function. And these young people, their job is to put together shopping bags or bags of food that are distributed, I think it's 50,000 at a time, to the poor in the country. And they expect to be feeding about 1 million people out of the 4.2 million, roughly, more or less, that we have here in the country. You know, we may be that high, I don't know. But all of this is going on, and this is going on constantly. This particular activity goes on just a matter of a few blocks from where I live. You know, I can see the trucks rolling in, the big ones, for them to, with different kinds of food and what have you, for them to put these things together. And wow, you know, everything click, 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 click. But there are always going to be people who complain. And we've had a lot of, you know, Panamanians are very independent people, and they don't like being told where to be and, you know, what they can do and they can't do. They're very stubborn that way. So I'm not surprised at all that they've had all these folks who've been fined. But you know, we make it a very serious offense, and you know, at the same time they're being treated without any harm, except financial, and that sometimes hurts more than being tossed in a jail cell for a week. But the important thing is it's done, and it's being brought home time after time again. Meantime, the society has rallied. Now, I've said there was this major survey of public opinion done. It's done by a nonpartisan group here. And it was done late last year and indicated that the government institutions were just not very popular in Panama. They're thought to do very poor work. And this just came out the last week of March. They did this survey. Oh, what a difference this has all made. Now we have approval rates from 70 to 80% in government across the board. The worst off, with only 14% approval, is the National Assembly. That's the politicians. Okay. And they're at the bottom of the heap. But at the top, right across the board, for most amazingly, are the government institutions, particularly, of course, the Ministry of Health, but everybody who's been involved in this particular activity has come out looking really good. And unanimity, not unanimity, but the extent of the support and the popularity of these institutions is really the first time I've ever seen anything like it, because they have earned it, all right? And, of course, there are going to be people who badmouth them. And there'll be folks who expats who sit there and not really know what's going on, who don't even bother to Google translate the local newspapers. They can find out what's going on. They've not a clue as to what's happening. Yet they have a strong opinion. And they worry about such and such people. We have people here who are not Panamanians, and they're not from the U.S. or whatever. We have all sorts of people in Panama. And residents like myself, as well as the citizenry, and then tourists, and then also everybody is covered. Everybody gets attention. Nobody gets pushed off to one side and they don't get food, or they don't get medical care or whatever. We're all in this together. That was from the very beginning. It's been very clearly stated that that is the case. As such, then, we just keep moving forward. I'm very proud to be associated with a nation where this is going on because, quite frankly, I'm not impressed with what I see going on in North America and Europe, and, for that matter, East Asia. I am much more impressed. This is a democracy, and that was one of the things that was really comforting because in Latin America, there's a lot of skepticism, and it's been found in many opinion surveys in the past about democracy. Does it really work? Because they're so used to having so-called democracy and then the big man deciding he wants to be president for life or something of this sort. And this survey was taken so overwhelming support for democracy here in Panama. And they haven't been so supportive of that in the past because of problems. This has done us a lot of good. Now, politics will eventually come through, and of course there'll be disagreements and so on in the future. But the critical thing is we've gotten through this period very well. We have April to finish off, and this is expected to get really bad. But now I'm going to show you that graph that I put together. It's nothing special. Others have too. I just put one together for this particular presentation, and I update it every day. And unfortunately, today's statistics are not available. Now I say that, let me take a quick look and see if I can find today's stats. And if I can, I will be able to let you know if there's been any difference. Okay. I am trying to, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it has popped up to 224. That's a high. Okay. Alrighty, but I think only 2 new people have passed away. That's good. Okay. Well, all right. As you'll see in this graph I've done, we seem to be coming down over the last week or so, but you got to keep this in mind. I mean, the high point here is 198. Now, today's is 224, so it's going to pop up a lot higher. That's too bad. I'm sort of hoping we could keep it up somehow. But the real fact of the matter is that given what they know already about the course of where we stand, the position we're in at this time, in comparison to countries all over the world where they stood at this particular time, we can expect more over the next week or two. So, folks, I think the take-home here is that we are very fortunate. We really are. People are taking care of each other. I'm just so happy because it could have been such a god-awful mess. And I'm so very pleased that the politicians were just shoved right out to the side, and everybody associated with them. Thank you. And they got down to business from day one, and they've gone shoulder to shoulder. This is not typical. So it is wonderful to see the behavior, and the results are very, very clear. I was glad that survey came out. It says I need to hear it too. It's one thing for me to sit here and to assume this because of what I see and what I hear. It's called anecdotal information, but it's awfully nice to have a survey, especially one that was so negative last year and now it's so positive this year, and you begin to realize, yes, it's true. It really is. So it's been a long time since I have spoken to you, but I have been trying to get a grip on this whole situation to give you some idea, and I'm going to leave it tonight. But I guess so many other things I could say, but I've taken up quite a bit of time already. But it is going to be bad. We don't know, as President Cortizo keeps reminding us, we don't know when it's going to peak. We just think we know. We will find out. But it is going to be tough, and we will get through it. We're going to get through this, and we will come out of it. And we will have been hurt terribly, I have no doubt, from an economy viewpoint. But, as I've often said, if we get hurt, other people have gotten run over because in this case, very much so. There's no other place I'd rather be. Okay. from that viewpoint, and we will come out of it. Now, you're not coming down here to buy a house or to pick up your residency visa immediately. We'll get to that. I just don't know when that's going to be. I assume that the earliest that will be May, and then maybe we have to be careful because, unfortunately, places like Japan and Singapore and South Korea, what have you, have reported that once they seem to have everything under control, they've had an increase in cases because they're allowing people in from, guess where, North America and Europe, and they're bringing it back. So we're all learning on the basis of their work because, as it would be, the case would be, we got it later, so now we can watch what's going on elsewhere and see ourselves a week or two down the road and get ready for that. Maybe see ourselves. Well, we play it by ear, and we just work with it. They have their plan. They're implementing it. They have changed it. Drop of a toothpick, I was going to say, something small, when necessary. I just passed one amusing thing that I'm familiar with, at least up in the United States. Apparently, well, CNN and Fox news programs both have mentioned Panama, basically because we had divided up the week. We had by age group, and people like myself over 60s, the vulnerable group, we were at the 11 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We could circulate freely in the city as we went to banks and we went to supermarkets, the essential stuff. But then they included a breakdown that 3 days men could do it, and 3 days women could, so divided between the two genders. And this seemed to really amaze people up north. And why? Why would you do this? Well, the simple answer here is just very pragmatic. Of the 6,000 people, whatever, we had some troubles with, who were out when they shouldn't have been, 90% were men. Surprise, surprise. So, as a result of that, by dividing it this way, there's one day, Sunday, nobody's on the street, except those who have a real, genuine need to be and can prove it. And then we have 3 days when men and 3 days women. So in the 3 days when women are out, if you're male and you're out in the street, you better have your paperwork on you allowing you to be there because they got you. And during the 3 days when those of us who are the male gender are out there, as was the case today, none of us have any time of, not even the time of day for somebody who we think is screwing things up. It's working. It's bringing down this sort of activity. A lot. And it's such a drop in the bucket compared to what so many other nations have faced. So no complaints. Oh, anybody can complain, something like this going on, but no special complaints at all. It's a blessing in many ways that if we have to go through it, and we do, that we go through it this way. And I hope we'll continue to, whatever the future holds. And whatever it does hold, I'll share with you. And who knows, in 2 weeks, everything's falling apart or, whatever, then I'll talk about it. But I did want to get back here and talk to you. I did want to have enough information just to not sit here and just give little tiny bits and pieces of what I can see from my balcony when I look outside the, go out. That's as far as I can go, except for 2 hours, 3 days a week. And we may have 2 days now off. We will. Oh, of course, this is Easter. Seder down here, the Jewish community pretty much did that virtually by computer, over the internet. And likewise, for Christians, we have Easter coming down, and this weekend, which is Easter weekend, nobody out except necessary personnel on Saturday and Sunday. It will be done virtually. It will be done on television, on the internet, and everything else. And people are very clear on that, and our arrangements have been made. And that was very important, not to have large groups of people get together and then infect each other as a result. So anyhow, we're moving. We're working on it. Thank you for your patience. I will eventually get back to you. I really don't forget you ever. I just have this stuff I need to get done, and I need to collect more, so I have something more to tell you than, hello, how are you? And so it is today. I thank you for dropping by, and I look forward to seeing you again. See if I can ever find how to, where is it? Where'd it go? Aha.